Hello there ladies and gentlemen, my name is BurnCrowSP and welcome to a very different video format compared to what I usually put out on this channel. You see, the state of the MegaMan franchise has become a pretty big talking point recently, due to the lack of new titles, some really nasty birthday gifts, and a certain open letter to Capcom that has sparked the conversation in social media. But today we won't be discussing that, since there are way better videos about that topic, like ShadowRockZX's Mega News episode, which I heavily recommend you to watch if you are mildly interested in this video game series. Now, this video is about a very different ordeal that sadly the Mega Man series has to deal with when it comes to finding new players. Now that the franchise is having a hard time trying to remain active, some people have pointed out how Mega Man should be expected to get less attention from Capcom than the company's big names like Monster Hunter or Resident Evil, since those games sell way more copies and are easier to get into. And that made me ask a question to myself: is Mega Man such an inaccessible game series? And in case the answer is yes, then why? Luckily, there is an explanation to this way of thinking, and to give you all the answers, first I have to go back to the very beginning, because surprisingly, this topic hides its roots within the main concept these games are built around. So, well, let me just dive in, make yourself comfortable, because we are in for quite a ride. Mega Man, like many other video game franchises born in the 80s, started as a 2D action platformer. From 1987 to 1993, Mega Man got 6 different entries on the NES, building a legendary hexology of very unique platformers that based their gameplay loop on the concept of non-linear stage progression. This was a novelty at the time, since most games of the genre followed a more fixed structure, like first level 1, then level 2 and so on. A design decision that was amplified by how the main character obtains weapons from the bosses he defeats, which can then be used to fight other robots. These ideas incentivize players to experiment with different routes to the game, trying new weapons until the perfect, most optimal strategy is found, thus increasing the replayability of each game. Despite this unique take on game design, nowadays all Mega Man games are well known for a very different reason, and it's the common thought that they are very difficult games. If you try searching up on Google a list of the hardest video games released for the NES, the chances to find at least one entry starring the Blue Bomber is quite high. In some cases, ranking even higher than infamously hard games, like Ghosts and Goblins or Battletoads. Still, since the late 2000s, difficult games have experienced a renaissance of sorts when it comes to popularity, thanks to the success of video games that deviate from the casual-friendly experience that most AAA titles usually aim for. Games like Demon's Souls or Celeste, or even straight-up unfair games like I Wanna Be the Guy. So then, if hard games are popular now, why am I speaking about this aura around Mega Man as a hindrance to the franchise? Well, the thing is, I can confidently assure you that the Mega Man hexology as a whole is far easier to complete than some of the most well-known platformers of the 8-bit era. And the reason behind that claim is just one word: polish. Despite being released on a yearly basis, which is something we'll get into later down the line, you only need to play a few minutes to any of these games to notice how they are very different to most franchises at the time. Even when looking at the very first Mega Man game, it's easy to notice how well the main character controls. You can quickly alter your jump's trajectory, and that's a trait that will make any Belmont feel jealous. And any action feels quick and snappy, except for trying to stop Mega Man to a halt. And so sprites are detailed, the art direction is very strong, creating fictional, cartoony worlds filled with charm, and set pieces, characters that are still memorable 30 years later. So, considering these traits, it's even more surprising to see how most players view the franchise nowadays, and talk about these games as if they were too hard and tough to pick up and play. But this intimidating aura does indeed have a catalyst. Okay, let me ask you a question. Out of these 6 games, which one do you think it grabs the most attention nowadays? If your answer is Mega Man 2, well, of course, it's Mega Man 2. It's no surprise. If you look at the sales, the second entry was the commercial peak of the franchise for a very, very long time, selling 1.5 million copies. Even if it looks like nothing to today's standards, back in 1988 it was a very big deal. Even more considering the very rough development story that this game holds within itself. So why is this important? Well, because for someone who isn't familiar with the Blue Bomber, Mega Man 2 and Mega Man 3 are the most well-known entries of the original games, and so they are what most gamers will likely gravitate towards, especially since Mega Man 2 is also often considered the best game in the classic series. Yet, ironically, these two games are probably the ones that aged the worst, thanks to various factors that affected the original products, like troubled development cycles, tight schedules, and a whole bunch of things that led to these two specific games being noticeably rough around the edges. Heck, even Mega Man 3 is known among fans for being almost a release beta of a full game. The non-linear design of these games can somewhat amplify this Mega Man is too hard narrative. Since Mega Man 2 is usually the main target for new audiences, there is a chance that unsuspecting players might stumble right into Quickman stage or Hitman stage, and then ask themselves, if this is the best game in the series, how are the rest even gonna be like? And don't get me wrong, those two levels can become really easy to complete with enough patience. In fact, the game allows you to use different tools to bypass these levels. However, bad first impressions can go a long way, and if players lose interest, well, then it's easy for them to just drop it for something else. And you might be thinking, but Crow, when I was 5 I could beat this game with my eyes closed. How is it possible that casual players have such a degree of skill issue? Well, my answer is, thanks for the segue into the next topic. Well, the skill issue thing is not that far from the truth actually. It's just not as insulting as that term is normally used for. Okay, let me explain myself. When I was a kid, platformers and old games were my go-to, since the only thing I could play video games on was my father's almost prehistoric computer. Thanks to MAME and some NES emulators, I was able to get into the hobby that remains with me even to this day. However, everything changed when one day he went up to the attic and came down with a small CRT along with his PS1. Even if I was born as a person from Generation C, I never had a modern console until way later, and seeing 3D games for the first time on that PlayStation was something out of this world. And because I hadn't played a single 3D game before, understanding how to move any character in a 3-dimensional space was quite a task at first, especially since tank controls and fixed camera angles were very common at the time. Like, let's be clear, most of the people who played Resident Evil 2 when it came out probably died to the very first zombie while trying to fumble around with the controls. But once I got the grip of that badass dual analog controller, I was in for some fun. But the truth is, this story has turned upside down nowadays. Just a few years ago, before indie games became as popular as they are now, 2D games became very sporadic, relegated to a second plane as 3D games transformed the industry, going from an awesome novelty to a standard. And you have to keep in mind that video games, since they came to be half a century ago, have evolved at an absurd pace. Since the invention of home consoles, we have gone through 9 different console generations, most of them lasting for only 8 or 9 years max. Thus, younger players run into a vastly different medium compared to what people experienced back then when Mega Man was immensely popular. I guess I was just an exception to the rule. So where am I going with this? Well, just like how it took me a while to understand the jump from 2D games to 3D, the opposite can also happen. The complexity of the two-dimensional plane is often ignored since games were simpler in concept back then. But the truth is, titles like Mega Man are easy to understand, but they require as much skill as any other video game to actually master. And to show that I ain't talking this out of my ass, I decided to ask around and get the testimonies of people who have found themselves recommending Mega Man games to relatives, or even their younger siblings, like the person who's going to come in right now.
Hello there, this is ShadowRockZX, and I gotta say, man oh man am I glad that BurnCrow is doing this video, because this is one of the main topics that's really keeping MegaMan from hitting mainstream, and that is simply getting people from the outside of the fandom in with us into our club. I myself have had my success stories and my failures in terms of getting people into MegaMan. But more interesting is my failures. And one of my hardest struggles throughout the years is getting my two younger sisters into MegaMan. It's not for a lack of interest, mind you. They have shown interest in the characters and the world. One of my sisters has always loved Zero from the Mega Man X series, ever since she laid eyes on him. And honestly, kinda like me, she thought that Zero was a girl based on the X1 sprite until we found out otherwise. Meanwhile, my other sister has actually tried to learn all the Robot Masters. We even did a video together one time where she tried to name all the Robot Masters just off the design alone. So it's not really a lack of interest. The thing stopping them is actually playing the games. So for a little background, these are the types of games that my sisters typically play. RPGs, rhythm games on mobile especially, that's their big thing. They play visual novels, they play a lot of 3D games, like The Legend of Zelda, Twilight Princess. One of my sisters plays Genshin Impact to this day, but the one genre they don't have a lot of experience with is 2D platformers. See, unlike myself that was able to grow up with 2D action games from the moment that I was introduced to video games from a young age, my sisters did not have that luxury so much. Because as soon as they started playing video games, 3D games were here to stay by that point. So those are the type of games that they play the most. Now to their credit, one of my sisters has actually played some of the Battle Network and Star Force games here and there, but I'm not sure if they actually grabbed her attention enough for her to stay with it all the way through. More importantly, whenever I have tried to get my sisters to sit down and play one of the 2D games like, Mega Man X1, X4, Mega Man 11 and so on, I sit there and watch them and I quickly realize that they don't know how to 2D platform at all. It's one thing to jump and shoot, but to people who are not used to these games, it's an almost impossible task to combine those actions. After all, Mega Man is Jump and Shoot Man, right? Not just Jump Man or Shoot Man, Jump and Shoot Man. And that is exactly what the games require of you to be successful. However, for the newcomers that don't have these motor skills ingrained into them from being exposed to them over the years, yeah, they're probably going to struggle a lot to even beat the first level that they come across. Oh yeah, despite the fact that X1's highway stage does have a lot of teaching tools built into the level design, I did watch my sister die a lot. And this is precisely why, love it or hate it, these rookie hunter modes and easy modes and the save assist and all that stuff that the Legacy Collections has is a big boon for these people. For my sister, playing Mega Man 11 in the easiest difficulty there was actually allowed her to beat Blockman. Sure, there were still some struggles along the way, but she actually did it, and boy am I a proud brother. And it was all thanks to the newcomer friendly difficulty mode that Mega Man 11 provided. It allowed her to get the hang of the ropes of the game and actually just go at it until she won. And now for my success stories, which is pretty short. It's mostly having to do with Battle Network and Star Force. Back in 5th grade, I would play Battle Network 2 and 3 on the bus to school, and there were a couple other kids on the bus that saw me playing the game and got interested themselves. And ever since then, we were net battling each other every day before school, and it was awesome. One of those kids were even playing the Mega Man Zero games by extension. Around the same time, I met another kid at a community function that was playing Battle Network 3 already, and it wasn't long before we had sleepovers and were exchanging info on how to progress in the games. I had another friend that played Star Force 1 alongside me because, I was playing it, so he wanted to be a part of it. And I think that's kind of the attitude we need to have towards newcomers, in order to just bring more people into the fandom. It's not very healthy to be elitist about it. You have to play rookie hunter mode. Nah, dude, get good. Thing is, we all have our own paths to take in life. We've had our own origin stories with video games, and that comes with our own set of skills. Like in my sister's case, when their 3D skills didn't really apply to 2D skills as much, unfortunately. It's a whole different ball game, and if we don't encourage these people to keep trying and getting better, if we don't try to make gateways for more people to get the hang of it and start to enjoy it, they're just going to end up frustrated and never touch Mega Man ever again. And we don't want to see that. So yeah, that is my mission for you all. Keep an open mind, be encouraging to your fellow people trying to get into Mega Man, and don't really force it either. In my case, I've had the most success just being like, hey man, I'm playing this cool game, you want to check it out? And really, sometimes that's all it takes. Thanks BurnCrow for having me on.
And thank you for your wise words, Cesar. And I too have seen this before when talking to a few of my friends. So what I'm trying to say is that nowadays, variety has bloomed when it comes to video games. Now we have many genres that require very different things from its players. And compared to the 80s and 90s, it's clear why the skill set of gamers has evolved, in the same way their hobbies have done so. So after lecturing you guys on one of the main issues that stops people from playing Mega Man, let's dive into the second and even bigger problem that I want to discuss with you. But first, a word from today's sponsor. Nah, I'm just joking, I don't have one of those. I just wanted to have a funky way to change topics, and so So remember when I told you a few moments ago that Mega Man got 6 entries on the NES in just about 5 years? Well, considering other platformers at the time got 1 or 2 sequels at max, like, you know, Super Mario, Castlevania or Ninja Gaiden, it might sound like a surprise to see a full hexology released in the same console. And this is because after Mega Man 3, Capcom decided to hold a special contest aimed at the fans of these games. Players could send drawings and concept art for new Robot Masters, the characters which Mega Man fights as end bosses across his adventures. The winners will have their sketches reworked by Capcom developers, and then put into the next game. The first iteration of the contest was a massive success, and so they kept holding the tournament after the third entry was released in stores. And to make such an event work out properly, developers approach Mega Man games as yearly releases, so the next contest will be allowed enough time to happen. Although, the business model of releasing a game every single year didn't stop at the end of the 8-bit era. In 1993, Mega Man dashed right into Super Nintendo, now as Mega Man X. This game marked a new turning point for the franchise. It was the first time that the character, universe, and main game mechanics suffered big changes. The art style was grittier, with Mega Man X, instead of a kid, resembling more of a teenager, and the cartoony Robot Masters being exchanged for the Mavericks, animal-like sentient robots led by the corrupted Stigma, the former leader of the Maverick Hunters. Meanwhile, the gameplay was expanded upon, with different items to collect, like armor pieces or health upgrades, and also X was now able to dash and climb walls, and adding to the non-linear design, beating certain bosses will cause permanent effects on other stages. The combination of all of these changes, amplified by the edginess of 90s trends, led Mega Man X into a resounding success, getting really close to Mega Man 2's sale numbers. And here's where things get really interesting. A sequel was given to this new entry on the franchise, in the form of Mega Man X2, with enough success to motivate Capcom to keep up with yearly releases for the franchise. And so more games were made. 1995 brought both Mega Man X3 and Mega Man 7, which made people go, huh? Didn't Mega Man evolve into this? Why this again? And then in 1996, Mega Man 8 took the character into the 32-bit era. But then, It was followed by the first 3D entry in the series, MegaMan Legends, in 1997. And so this trend of making more games kept going into the 2000s, when suddenly everything came crashing down. The series had slowly gained a reputation of prioritizing quantity over quality, a tendency that led to a few big problems. Game critics were bored by the non-stop releases of new titles, claiming that there weren't enough reasons to give these games so many entries in such a short span of time. On the other side, fans struggled to keep up, with games being launched on both home and handheld consoles, at a very alarming rate. The situation reached a breaking point in 2003, a year in which Capcom released 8 games in total, one of them being a spin-off of a spin-off series. And so, combine the insane number of entries with a horrible rebranding of the franchise in Europe, on top of bad reviews and poor sales, and you get a fantastic recipe for disaster. A disaster that is still felt today. Nowadays, I can easily understand why, from the outsider's perspective, it is hard to know where to start from when it comes to Mega Man games. And it's common to veteran video game sagas to explore new horizons, yet no one reached the oversaturation that Capcom's Blue Robot was forced into. And so here's another big talking point. Mega Man spin-offs are treated quite differently. So spin-offs are common practice when it comes to video games. Often you'll see different franchises exploring a wide variety of genres, and take the IP into uncharted territory. A perfect example of this practice is of course Super Mario. Nintendo's iconic character might be one of the most versatile entities in video game industry. He's been in party games, he's also been in racing games, RPGs, and even strategy games. And in Mega Man's case, he's also proved to be quite the multifaceted character. Aside from the mainline games and the X series, he's been into RPGs with both Mega Man Battle Network and Mega Man Star Force. There's also Mega Man CX, a game that introduced Metroidvania elements to the usual level design. He's also been in kart racers with the unique yet forgotten Battle Chase, and in arcades with Power Battle, and he's even appeared in most of the Capcom crossover fighting games. So, where's the problem, right? Well, because the Blue Bomber has changed a ton over the years. Even if the fanbase is mostly okay with the character's multiple faces, outsiders have a vastly different opinion, especially when it comes to Battle Network and Mega Man Legends. One being a very unique mix of both turn-based and action RPG elements that throws in strategy and deck building mechanics, and the other one being an action 3D adventure game, both being a big deviation from the core formula of the franchise. And even if they are spin-offs, interestingly, if you go back and take a look at what critics had to say about these games, you might notice how, despite the good scores, people saw them as some sort of fake Mega Man games. Gaming press often mention how it's not the classic Mega Man we all know and love, or how such a radical departure from the franchise's roots is only going to appeal to hardcore players. And out of those reviews that didn't go that way, the others mention how Battle Network, Star Force, and even Mega Man Zero are games designed to appeal to a very specific niche within the fandom. People even said that some of these branches of the series are only enjoyable for a niche within a niche of players already familiar with Capcom's Blue Robot. However, this way of thinking did not go away as time went on. Even nowadays, these branches of the franchise are considered to be only appealing to very specific players for some reason. And still, Battle Network was really popular in Japan, even for new audiences, to the point where the fourth entry got very close to dethroning Mega Man 2 as the best-selling game in the entire series. And here's where it all comes full circle. too many releases, its reputation as a niche only for hardcore player series, it all comes to this. Out of 169 entries, like I said at the beginning of this video, only a few games have managed to make their way into mainstream culture. And so, new players who come into the series do so with very specific expectations about what the standard Mega Man experience should be all about. And then that clashes with what the fandom might think about these games, since depending on who you ask, you'll get very different stories. So, with both main issues already explained enough, the time has come. And now that you have all the context, I can answer the question this video is all about. So, is Mega Man really that inaccessible as a franchise? Are the rumors actually true? Well, here's the answer. No, it is not. So far, I've told you what makes Mega Man hard to get into. Stuff like the flood of games, the lack of popularity of most titles, leaving only a few of them to become what Mega Man is to most people. All of that turned the franchise into a confusing mess to the common gamer. But the thing is, those days are long gone. The reason why I went on and on about how this series got to this point is because, well, like I told you, the pass of time brings changes to many things. The generation of players that once experienced the popularity of classic Mega Man, as well as those who had Battle Network or Zero or whatever their favorite side of the franchise was, they are all now at the exact same situation. There are no more games on the horizon for any of them. And thus, the common reaction to this supposed Dark Age Part 2 thing is to think that Mega Man is going to go back to the shadows, back to being irrelevant to most people. And here's the twist. I feel like it's actually the opposite situation, and allow me to elaborate on that claim, okay? So yeah, no new games sucks as a fan, I am fully aware of that, but it also means that the door is open for both fans and new players to actually look back on the series and maybe discover most of the stuff that got lost among the years of, 8 releases in the same year. And now that I mention it, looking back on the series has never been easier thanks to the Legacy collections. For the last few years, Mega Man games have received collections, ports, and several releases that bring most of the franchise to recent platforms, out there for people to play. And also, these collections go and fix some of the problems that I talk about when regarding the oldest games. Both Mega Man Legacy Collection and Mega Man Legacy Collection 2 feature a wide variety of accessibility options, like save states, rewind, and such. The same applies to Mega Man X Legacy Collection and Mega Man Zero CX Legacy Collection, both featuring stuff like Rookie Hunter mode or Safe Assist mode. And so, those people who found these games to be too hard now have a perfect way to try them out, get accustomed to how they play, and maybe discover why the fans love them so much. As for the fans themselves, no matter what you loved about the series, no matter which side of it resonated with you the most, this is the right moment to seek out those sides of the Blue Robot's history that maybe you never had eyes for. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to tell you to buy all of these games, this is not propaganda. What I'm saying is that Mega Man is not just the classic games, Mega Man is not just the X series or Battle Network, Mega Man is so much more. And this variety, this disparity that exists between series, the differences that put off people for so many years and that confuses new players, it's something that's actually great. No matter if you love RPGs, platformers, or adventure games, there is a Mega Man game that might suit your tastes. And this is what Mega Man really is. A massive franchise that sadly passed under the radar of so many people for a very long amount of time. So, is Mega Man really that inaccessible? No. It's not, because the games are right there, with all the features that casual players would love to have. And if you don't find this fun, well then go and try this other game, maybe you'll find some enjoyment out of it. So my message to you, both the veteran players and those people who might be doubting if they really want to try these games out, is to keep an open mind. You just need to find your MegaMan. But now, before closing this video with some of my personal thoughts, as a person who has played almost all MegaMan games, allow me to recommend you one game from each sub-series that I think you may enjoy as your first time experience. Like, you know, a little push to know where to start from. And also, just to clarify, this is just my opinion, okay? The best thing you can do is just follow your heart, okay? So, the classic series is the biggest one so far. Just like I said during the video, they are 2D action platformers with non-linear stage designs and very challenging levels overall. The first iteration of the iconic blue robot evolved a lot from game to game, adding new mechanics like the slide, rush, or even the charge shot. And because of that, the game that I can recommend you the most is of course MegaMan 11, the latest title of the entire franchise. This game has many accessibility features and all the little adjustments that were added along the way, and also a brand new gameplay gimmick in the form of the double gear system. Also, this is the first game that dives into the origins of the main characters for its plot, if you are interested in that aspect of the franchise. It's in every modern console and it gets on sale very often, so yeah, I think it's a perfect way to get into MegaMan. As for MegaMan X, the fourth entry is a very easygoing and fun game to play through. It features all of the key concepts of the series, like exploration and a heavier focus on narrative. Also, it's the first game where Zero is playable. Regarding the actual game design, it holds some of the best boss fights of the series, with a great set of mavericks and a very memorable final stretch despite its short length. Even if some of its levels can get a little bland at times, since they are meant to be played at a very fast pace, I'd argue it's a good game for novice players to sink their teeth into MegaMan X. Nowadays you can find this game on X Legacy Collection 1, along with some of the most consistent games of the X series. So now about MegaMan Legends, it only has 2 games, so the first one is an easy recommendation. This branch of the series is actually the last bit of the story so far, with a flooded world that holds a very dark past. They beat Wind Waker by 4 years on that plot device. MegaMan Volnut is the protagonist of the story, a digger who, after crashing into Catalog's Island, along with engineers Roll and Barrel Casket, is tasked with retrieving the missing pieces of the now broken airship. So Legends is a very different game that delves into 3D action adventure elements. Thus, players will travel through the island, exploring dungeons. Sadly though, none of these 2 games have been released since their PS1 debut, and now that the PlayStation Network version is probably gone, you might need to get the Dock PlayStation to check them out. I would recommend you to try the first one, since Legends has a pretty interesting plot going on, but also Legends 2 adds DualShock support, so maybe you'll have a nicer time with those controls. Just try to avoid MegaMan 64, since it's the inferior version of the first game. Honestly, even for an early 3D game, Legends still looks and sounds really good, so in my opinion it's worth a shot. Moving on to Battle Network, it might be the most unique series of games I have ever seen. They combine turn-based and action RPG combat along with deck building and strategy elements. Both BN and Star Force are an alternate universe to the rest of the franchise, in a world where, rather than robots, all the characters are computer programs instead. The Legacy Collections are the perfect way to play this, since they added back content that was lost in translation, as well as special event content that for a very long time was only accessible for Japanese players. Since the story is somewhat lighthearted, and each game barely ties in with the previous entries, I'd point you to either BN2 or BN5. These two games have a pretty good difficulty curve and they're best iterations of each of the trilogy's main mechanics. Also, they have a pretty good plot going on. Or you can go straight to BN6, since it's the most balanced and overall most polished game in the entire series. The only issue with that is that, well, this is the last game, but because the main character moves to a new setting with a whole new cast, I don't think it's that big of an issue. As for Star Force, they have a much deeper plotline, and it expands on what BN cemented years ago, with a new combat system and a very different set of characters. Also possibly the best cast of the entire franchise in my opinion. If you wanna try them out, I'd recommend Star Force DX, a quality of life improvement patch for the first game that the Rockman EXE Zone released a few years ago, and that takes the first entry and introduces some elements that arrive later in the trilogy. The thing is, to play this one you might need to take out the, you know, the big DS, but I think it's worth your time. And last but not least, there's MegaMan Zero and MegaMan CX. They kept building upon what worked on the Mega Man X games, but they both differ from it in different aspects. For starters, Zero puts a bigger emphasis on the narrative side of things, with an ongoing plot that treats each game like an anime arc of sorts, developing both characters and plot elements as the series goes on. Gameplay-wise, they are more oriented to action, with deeper combat elements, and a ranking system that kinda puts it between the line of action platformer and a 2D hack-and-slash game. As for Mega Man CX, on the other hand, they went to Metroidvania territory, so if you like those games, maybe you can get some enjoyment out of it. All 4 Zero games, along with CX and its sequel CX Advent, were bundled into a legacy collection of their own, so if you really want to give this a shot, I think it's the best way to do so. Zero games are very challenging, and the accessibility options have proved to be excellent for new players to fully enjoy them. And wow, that's it, huh? Guess it's time to wrap this up. So, before waving goodbye, let me speak a small bit about why I care so much about these games, and why I ended up writing, recording, and publishing this video. As you might have noticed by now, I am a massive fan of the franchise. I have played almost every game there is so far, and I have the Blue Bomber as my desktop, for crying out loud. So yeah, what I see on this Blue Bomber is a very unique set of games created by people who never doubted when trying new things, despite the results. But also on the other side, I see a sad tale of a character that was almost forgotten thanks to the company that brought him to life, thanks to mismanagement and big gaps of nothing. I made this video because nothing will make me happier than seeing new players get to experience these games, just like I did so many years ago, because nothing beats the feeling that you get after conquering the Yellow Devil for the first time. Nothing beats getting your first ever style change in Battle Network, or seeing Zero's story unfold upon your eyes. Mega Man, ladies and gentlemen, is not dead, and it won't ever be, because luckily the fanbase will still be there, or so I hope. And I have the feeling that the best is yet to come for the franchise. No one knows what will come in the future. Maybe we'll get a new game, or maybe not. But what is certain, on the other hand, is that what we have now is a treasure that deserves to be known about. This is BurnCrowSP, and I'll see you next time. Hey there, thanks for staying through to the very end, that really makes me happy. If you're hearing this or seeing this or whatever, you know, please feel free to comment. Let me know what you think, because I'll gladly discuss with you all about this franchise I love so much. So just try to keep it polite, okay? I know this is a very indifferent video to the usual guide stuff I post about, and I still want to finish my Being 4 Road to Completion series, but I really wanted to get this out of my chest, you know? And I had a lot of fun doing it, so maybe if you guys enjoyed this video, I'll probably come back with a different topic some other time, who knows? Anyway, enough for today from my side, see ya, take care, and bye bye!